Horror Month.
Let me look at the thermostat.
You are all my maniacs now.
And welcome back to Horror Month 2018 with the Box Office Maniacs and our next movie in the Nightmare on Elm Street series called Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge.
So is this like Jaws the Revenge, Vince? Is there a shark in this movie?
To the shark!
Oh, you come in a golden carriage?
No, this is better.
Oh, well, I was going to make sure there was no shark in this film.
No, this is better.
So nobody gets eaten by a shark is what you're saying?
It's the one movie in the whole franchise of Nightmare on Elm Street that it's not really looked upon as being one of the best of the series.
Shh, the birds are sleeping.
Let me tell you straight off here, Vince, straight up here, that this whole movie and this whole review, I am going to be biased on this because I have such great memories of seeing this film, and it's completely nostalgic for me. This entire Part 2 film is pure nostalgia for me, and, you know, I want to let people know that, you know, when they're watching this review. So even if you hate this movie, you know, for me, that's what this is. This is pure nostalgia. Is it a great film? No. But I love this movie. I absolutely love Part 2.
This was my very first film in the whole Nightmare series that I watched. I never did get to see A Nightmare on Elm Street 1 until after I saw this one. I don't know why necessarily. It just kind of worked out that way that I saw this one first before I saw the second one. And if you remember our review of the first one, I actually got into an altercation at the theater that I was going to go and see it at, but I never got to see the movie.
Sure. It's 97 degrees in here.
Believe it or not, my mom I convinced her to rent at least Nightmare on Elm Street 2. So yeah, this is my first Nightmare movie, and I enjoyed it as well. It's going to be kind of nostalgic for me too.
Well, at the point this came out, I was super Freddy fan. Super Freddy fan. I mean, I was 100% #1 Freddy Krueger fan, and I had pictures of him and posters of him from Fangoria magazine, and I was #1 Freddy fan. So when this sequel came out, I was all in. I mean, I was 100% in. They could have probably had a movie where Freddy was just taking a poop for 2.5 hours, and I'd be like, that was the greatest thing I have ever seen.
And for me, it probably would have been the same. Like I said, this was the very first time I ever even saw Freddy Krueger. I didn't know anything about Nightmare on Elm Street, didn't know anything about what was going to happen. But the closest I came to anything about Part 2 was, you mentioned Fangoria. That was pretty much it. What I saw in Fangoria was like the only thing I ever saw of Nightmare on Elm Street at that point. But I always really wanted to go and see this at the movies, and never got to go see it at the movies. Never got to see the first one at the movies. So got to rent it on VHS, and I loved it. I mean, I loved it. I was like, this is freaking fantastic. I can't wait to see the first one. And it wasn't too long after I saw this one that I did finally get to see the first one.
Well, I do have a story time for this, but it's not a long one. After seeing the first one and just literally changing my life and changing how I saw horror films and the way I felt about them, I mean, I think Nightmare really did it for me. I was a Jason fan, I was a Friday the 13th fan for a long time, but when I saw this is what catapulted me into the horror, you know, genre. I was big into horror once I saw that. So when the second one came out, of course I was too young to go to the show to go see it, but I had to go. I had to see Nightmare 2, and nothing was going to stop me from going to see Nightmare 2.
I remember this one time I tried to sneak into an R-rated movie.
So I had this friend, and I told my friend, you know, we got to go see Nightmare 2. So we convinced his dad to drive us to the movie theater. And I told his dad, I said, well, I'll pay you you know, to go in to go see the movie, but you don't have to stay. You can leave once the movie starts and then come pick us up afterwards. So that's what we did. We drove to the theater. All three of us went in. I paid for his dad to see it. And then, you know, we all sat down. He got up, walked out of the exit, and me and my friend sat there and watched the whole film. And then afterwards, his dad came and picked us back up. And that's how I got into seeing Nightmare 2.
I tried to convince my parents to let me go see Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 2, and they wouldn't. So when it came out on VHS, like I said, that's when I finally got to see it.
Look at me. Do you like what you see? Good. Because it's not me. It's a recording of me on new Memorex videotape. This remarkable tape has been recorded and re-recorded 100 times, but I bet you still couldn't tell if it was Memorex or me, which really isn't me. It's Memorex. New Memorex videotape. Even after 100 recordings, you'll wonder, is it live or is it Memorex?
Trying to get my parents to actually let me watch Nightmare on Elm Street was like trying to ask them to, hey, can I jump in that pool full of razor blades?
Well, this is the point where, like I said, you know, Freddy only had one movie. And when he hit the second film, he was popular with the first movie, but I think when he hit that second movie and people saw him again and he started doing all the one-liners and everything, that is when he kind of exploded. It wasn't really until the third movie until he really exploded. But this one sort of catapulted, you know, Freddy from being just one movie slasher guy to the next Jason. I mean, this is basically the next Michael Myers. This is what created that, was the second film.
And yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, this is what got a lot of people into Freddy.
Something is trying to get inside my body, and you want to sleep with me.
One of the lines that they remember so much from any of the Nightmare on Elm Streets, there's several lines actually in this that people remember more than any of the other ones, but the one line that they remember most is, "You've got the body, and I've got the brain."
I don't know if it's on the extras, but I remember when he pulls his head back, pulls his skin back, and you see his brain, they said it was so much more disgusting than what they were allowed to show. They said that blood was squirting out of it and the brain was pulsating, and I would love to see that, but I don't think that's on the extras. I remember somebody talking about it, because it's so dark in that sequence, you can barely even see what's happening. You can see him pull his skin back, and you see the brain, but that's it. And it's such a great sequence, because, you know, in the first one, he was self-mutilating himself, cutting his fingers off and doing all that. So in this one, of course, he exposes the brain, and that was the coolest scene I had ever seen growing up. I was like, oh, wow, that is, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I was thrilled by that scene. I was like, wow, wow. And like I said, I really didn't know what Freddy was really all about at that point, because this was the first time I ever saw it. But it just thrilled me to no end. And it didn't really scare me, but I did find it disturbing when I saw it the first time. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
There was a couple sequences, I think I even cringed when I saw this as a kid, or I didn't really understand it, and I still don't really understand it today, is when the bird explodes in the middle of the air. The craziest sequence I have ever seen. And it was like a parakeet. Oh no, ducking and stuff. Little bird, like that's going to kill all of them.
Jesse, get out.
And then the bird just blows up for no reason. It boom, just explodes.
Poof! And you see a lot more feathers than probably that bird even had fall from the ceiling. And they're still looking up at the ceiling, and all these feathers are floating down in front of them.
I don't think it's ever that hot in the house where your bird's just going to explode. I don't think that would ever happen.
It's that cheap seed you've been buying.
Oh, please, Ken, really?
No, it could be. There's got to be a rational explanation.
Yeah, there were some parts of this movie that were just kind of, I mean, especially looking back on it now and watching it now, you go, okay, that's a little bit ridiculous.
And I gotta say something, and I'm not saying this to be mean or being an idiot or anything, but they talk about this in the extras, and again, seeing this as a kid and even seeing it over and over and over again, I really didn't get it, I guess, until they started talking about it in the extras. But this is one of the gayest movies ever made.
In fact, I may be the first male scream queen.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. Never even occurred to me. I mean, about any of that. I just looked at it as this is part of this guy's nightmare. That, and especially since there's, I mean, right before they actually even start to get into any of that, it's like there's parts where, like, for instance, the character of Grady says to Jesse, like, several scenes before that, he talks about the coach. And he says, well, the coach has got a stick up his ass. And then they say, well, he always has a stick up his ass. I mean, you could take that and go, okay, well, like I did the first time, was that, okay, this guy is just an asshole. He's just mean. He's just, and he's always mean to these guys. And that's all I ever thought about it. I didn't actually think that they were actually alluding to that, yeah, he's actually, a gay guy, and then he hangs out in gay bars and all of this stuff. I didn't even occur to me.
He's trying to have sex with his girlfriend in the one scene, and he decides to leave her and go over to Grady's house and sleep with him in the bed.
Something is trying to get inside my body, and you want to sleep with me.
When he's dancing there and he has the little pop gun and he pops it, well, he pops it toward his mom and who eventually becomes his girlfriend.
Wait a minute, Vince. You're saying his mom becomes his girlfriend?
No.
Wait a minute, what movie was this now? I must have missed that scene.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
You just got all weird on me.
This is still one of my favorite nightmare movies. It really is. And I know, like I said, it's a nostalgic factor, but I loved Freddy in this movie. I loved what he did in this movie. And a lot of people get upset because they bring Freddy from the dream sequence into the real world. And for me, that was awesome. I was like, oh my God, he's real now. He's in the real world. He can actually go around and do what he did when he was an actual serial killer. And I love that. I thought that was really cool, pretty creepy, and just loved that whole idea. And a lot of people just didn't like it.
Like I said, for me, this was my very first Nightmare on Elm Street. So watching it this way, it was like, I didn't even think about that. That didn't even occur to me. To me, that was a great idea. They were bringing him out of the dream and using Jesse as his body to come out of the dream world and into the real world again to kill again. And to me, that was a great idea. That was an awesome idea. And even looking back on it now, I still think it's an awesome idea.
The first three for me were the best. I can tell you right now, the first three were my favorite out of all of the Nightmare movies. And those are the ones I've seen the absolute most. I've seen these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And again, this one, I saw it in, when I was young, I was impressionable. I saw this film, and I loved Freddy, and I love what they did with him. I loved his one-liners in this, and I thought he was creepy and weird in this movie like he should have been, and I absolutely loved this film. So before we get to the extras, I am going to give my rating for the movie itself, and that is going to be a 5 out of 5. That's how much I enjoyed Nightmare 2.
We were now all the way back in that moment in time where I watched just this one. I would totally agree with you, Dave. I would say, yeah, it's a 5 out of 5. It's a fantastic film, but now, having watched that and then gone back and watched Nightmare on Elm Street 1, and then now from that point on seeing all the movies after that, yeah, it's not I don't care for it as much as the other ones. But it also wasn't because Freddy came out into the real world. It was actually, I looked at it as the nightmares themselves, because with that first film, you didn't know when Nancy was dreaming. You had no, you didn't know when she was dreaming. Even watching it after watching this one, you still didn't know. You didn't know when she was dreaming. You didn't know what was real, what was dream, what was nightmare, what was, everything, all the lines were always blurred. This one, it wasn't so much because you knew he was coming out into the real world. So it didn't, you know, the nightmares were pretty defined, is what I'm getting at. But aside from all that, my rating for this movie, finally, after all these years, giving a rating for the film itself, I would give it a 4 out of 5.
I mean, animals just don't explode into flames for no reason, do they?
That's right.
And there are quite a few extras on here, so we got to get to the extras. Here are the extras for Nightmare 2, and we are reviewing them from the box set, by the way, too. I should mention that. This is the box set that we both have that we're reviewing them from. So here we go, the extras for Part 2. Here we go, we're pulling the flesh back and looking at all the innards now of Nightmare 2.
Oh yeah, all the innards of Nightmare 2. We really want to see this.
Okay, so the first extra, this director, basically he's talking about making this film, and he didn't really know how big Freddy was. He didn't think that Freddy was a big thing at the point where he was making this. And Wes Craven was on there, and he said, well, I read the script, and I didn't want nothing to do with it. So, but they went ahead and made this movie anyway.
And this guy is really kind of strange, and he was really kind of weird and to listen to him talk. But at the same time, it was kind of interesting to hear him and how they picked him and chose him to do Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Basically, Wes Craven chose him. But Wes Craven gets on here after the director talks and talks about how much he hated the script to this movie.
And the director, like I said, he didn't know that Freddy was a phenomenon, or he was going to become a phenomenon. And at this point, by the second one, he already was. So I don't know where this director was living at exactly, that he wouldn't know what he was, especially if he was directing a movie of Nightmare on Elm Street. And the big thing is, Wes Craven did not want Freddy to come out of the dreams. He wanted him to stay in the dreams, and that's one of the reasons why he hated the script, because he doesn't think he should be out killing teenagers. He's like, well, actually, Freddy was shorter than the teenagers he was killing, and it looked kind of, you know, silly.
I kind of like that whole thing with him, and he's just slashing up teenagers, and okay, I guess that's what would happen if he came out into the real world. But that was actually the bigger problem with it, with Wes Craven, was that he didn't want Freddy to come out of the dream world into the real world and necessarily be doing that.
And it's very short. It's not a very long extra at all. It's probably less than 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes long. So the next one is what we were talking about during the review, and it's called
Psychosexual Circus.
Sounds like the Kiss album, Psycho Circus.
It does sound like a Kiss album.
And this is the one I must have seen something. I'm hoping it's on the bonus disc when we get to it, because I'm pretty sure I saw this on television. It was much, much longer than what was on here. And the director comes on there and he's like, I had no idea. None of this was intentional. He's like, none of all the sexual, you know, gay stuff in this movie that he said none of that was in his mind when he made this film.
The homoerotic stuff, as Rachel Talalay, who ended up being the director of Freddy's Dead, she's the producer of almost all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I think there was only one that she didn't produce. But she's on here and she's talking about it, and she keeps going on about how homoerotic it is. And that was her word. She just kept saying homoerotic.
And they said that there was this premier gay magazine that came out and it said this was one of the gayest films ever made.
But just the way they filmed it, it came across that way at the same time. And like I said in the review, I never really thought about it until they actually started pointing things out.
The thing that woman said too, which is really true, the biggest problem with this movie is pretty much in all the nightmares, just about all of them, there's always the female lead. There's always a female lead. In this one, they put Jesse in there, and he's very feminine. He's a very feminine guy, so it's like, well, why did they just, put a woman in there rather than get this guy who's very feminine?
And the director said the exact same thing, that he was very feminine. Well, it's probably because Mark Patton, the actor, is actually gay.
Yeah, see, I wasn't sure if he was or not. I didn't know. He's not even on here to talk about it.
But then Robert Englund comes on there, and he talks about what pretty much they said in the first extra was that he felt it went wrong because of bringing Freddy out into the real world, and also because of like the advertising of it.
Yeah, again, everybody complained about bringing Freddy out into the real world, and I just don't see that being the big downfall of this film. I don't. So I don't know.
Next up, we have The Male Witch, and this is where the director talks about how he met Kevin Yeager to do the special effects for Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Because Kevin Yeager is the one that actually took over the whole makeup effect, the whole look of Freddy, and redesigned it for Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And he ended up doing Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4 before David Miller came back into the picture. And I have to say, I liked the way Freddy looked in here, but I thought he also looked really fleshy. I thought he really looked, I mean, he was burnt, no doubt, but they made him, Kevin Yeager in this one really did make him look like he had a whole lot of flesh on him, whereas David Miller's was like, you know, the deep holes, and you could see, and the way David Miller did his makeup, you could actually see the flesh on top of the muscle, and you could see the muscle interact underneath the actual flesh that was on top, which I thought was the coolest thing, and I really kind of wish they would have went with that. But Kevin Yeager came in and did his work, and it was fantastic too.
Now, I really love the makeup effects in 2, 3, and even 4. 4 is probably one of the best ones. And I don't know, I like that. I like the deep wound look of Freddy, but I like that smooth look. And the smooth look actually had 1,000 more details going on everywhere. And I don't know, if I had to pick the two, I would actually probably pick Kevin Yeager's makeup over the first one.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I like Kevin Yeager's makeup, and especially with the fourth film. That's the one that he looked the best in.
So up next is Freddy on 8th Street, which is okay.
Basically, Robert Englund comes in here and kind of explains how Freddy relates to modern boogeymen. And then the director comes in and talks about how they weren't sure how well the movie was received eventually. So it's almost like these two are talking about, because they're actually two different interviews, but it was like they just put them together in this one extra.
Well, they basically talk about how they see people during Halloween starting to dress up as Freddy and realize now he's a phenomenon. After this movie, the second one kind of made him a phenomenon. And I personally thought this was pretty much a pointless extra. It's real short. And like you said, it's two different things kind of mixed in with each other. And I just thought it was a dumb extra.
It had a dumb title. And
there it is. That's all the extras on Part 2. I think they're pretty crappy, to tell you the truth. I don't think the extras here were very good at all. Not compared to this great film, you know. I just was not really impressed by the extras on here.
For me, the extras aren't bad. They're not terrible. But at the same time, I would have liked to have seen a making of Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I would have liked to have seen deleted scenes from Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I would have liked to have seen something that alluded to, you know, how they were making the film or what they originally decided on or where it came from. They don't go into any in-depth anything on this except to tell you about some of the stuff you've actually already known.
So there you go. That was Nightmare 2 movie and the Nightmare 2 extras and Nightmare 2 everything for this year's horror month. And of course, the classic is next. Part 3. You don't want to miss that, horror fan.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, is up next. So to see that, gotta hit the subscribe button. Gotta stay with us. Gotta stay with Horror Month.
31 days of nothing but pure horror.
Freddy's gonna be back again.
Well, it's sure not a leaky gas pipe.
Oh, God.